Bhagavatam ki jai. Sri Nrsimhadev Mahamahotsav ki jai. Shri Prahlad Maharaj ki jai. Gaura Bhaktarinda ki jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hare Hare Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we are reading today on the auspicious occasion of the appearance day of Sri Nrsimhadev, the 7th canto, chapter 5, verse 52. So we repeat together. Dharmam,
Dharmam,
Artham,
Artham,
Cha, Kamam,
Kamam,
Cha, Nitaram,
Nitaram,
Cha,
Cha,
Anupurvasha,
Anupurvasha,
Paradaya,
Paravaya,
Uchatu,
Uchatu,
Rajan,
Rajan,
Asrita,
Asrita,
Avantaya,
Avantaya,
Avanataya,
Avanataya,
Cha,
Cha,
Dharmam, Artham, Cha, Kamam, 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 Cha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Paradayo Chaturaja,
Paradayo Chaturaja,
Paradayo Chaturaja,
Paradayo Chaturaja,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Dharmam, Artham, Cha, Kamam, Cha,
Dharmam, Artham, Cha, Kamam, Cha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Nitaram, Chanapurvasha,
Paradayo Chaturajan,
Paradayo Chaturajan,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha.
Prasrita Vanataya Cha.
Please chant.
There is only one time Taya, yeah, in the last one.
Yeah.
Oh. Dharmam Artham Cha Kamam Cha,
Dharmamartham Cha Kamam Cha,
Nitaram Chanupurvasa,
Nitaram Chanapurvasha,
Paradayo Chaturajan,
Paradayo Chaturajan,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Dharmamatam cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham Cha Kamam Cha,
Nitaram chanupurvashaha
Nitaram Chanupurvasa,
Paradayo chaturajan
Paradayo Chaturajan,
Prashrita vanataya cha
Prasrita Vanataya Cha,
Dharmam artham cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham Cha Kamam Cha,
nitaram cha anupurvasha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
praharadhayo chata
Praradayo Chaturajan
rajan pasritaya bhataya cha
Prasitavataya cha
Dharmam artham cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Itaram janupurvasha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Prarataya yochu rajan
Praradayo Chaturajan
Prasvitavanataya cha
Prasritavanataya cha
Dharmam artham cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Prahradayo Chaturajan
Praradayo Chaturajan
Prasvitavanataya cha
Prasritavanataya cha
Mataji's.
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Praradayo Chaturajan
Praradayo Chaturajan
Prasritavanataya cha
Prasritavanataya cha Dharmamartham cha kamam cha Nitaram Janapurvasha Praradayo Chaturajan Prasritavanataya cha
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Dharmamartham cha kamam cha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Nitaram Janapurvasha
Prahradayo Chaturajan
Praradayo Chaturajan
Prasritavanataya cha
Prasritavanataya cha
Dharma. Mundane occupational duty.
Mundane occupational duty.
Artham.
Artham.
Economic development.
Economic development.
Cha.
And
Kamam.
Kamam.
Sense gratification.
Sense gratification.
Cha. And Nitaram.
Nitaram.
Always. Cha. And Anupurvasha. According to order. Or from the beginning. To the end. Aradaya. Unto Prahlad Maharaj. Uchatu. They spoke. Rajan. O king. Prasrita. Who was humble. Amanataya. And submissive. Cha. Also. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, and kindly repeat with me the translation. Thereafter, Sanda and Amarka systematically and unceasingly taught Prahlad Maharaj, who was very submissive and humble, about mundane religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Purport, please hear. There are four processes of human society: Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha, and they culminate in liberation. Human society must follow a process of religion to advance, and on the basis of religion, one should try to develop his economic condition so that he can fulfill his needs for sense gratification according to the religious rules and regulations. Then liberation from material bondage will be easier to attain That is the Vedic process. When one is above the stages of Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, one becomes a devotee. He is then on the platform from which he is guaranteed not to fall again to material existence. Yadgatvanani vartante. As advised in Bhagavad Gita, if one transcends these four processes and is actually liberated, one engages in devotional service. Then he is guaranteed not to fall to material existence again. Dharmam artam cha kamam cha nitaram cha nukurvasha paradayo cha tu rajan prasita manataya cha. Thereafter, Sanda and Amarka systematically and unceasingly taught Prahlad Maharaj, who was very submissive and humble, about mundane religion, economic development and sense gratification. Om Jnanatimirandasya Ganandana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So, in this verse, we hear that Sanda and Amarka, which were the sons of Shukracharya, were engaged in teaching Prahlad Maharaj about these three subject matters, which is mentioned as mundane religion, economic development, and sense gratification. So, it is interesting to note that they didn't have any element of moksha there. There's only three they were teaching. They didn't teach about the third one, moksha, because moksha, ultimately, that also involves the existence of the Supreme, the controller, Supreme Controller, as there are 5 kinds of liberation. One of them being impersonal, of course, Sayuja, but the other 4, they are directly related to Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Controller. One can live on the same planets. One can have the same qualities, Samipya, and one can be a very close associate. And what is the last one?
One can have the same opulences.
Same opulences, yes. So they didn't teach about this 4th part, which is called moksha. So that's of course because they saw Lord Vishnu as the enemy. So how could they teach anything related to the enemy? So the atheistic class of men, they completely disregard the existence of the Supreme Controller, and therefore they're only concerned with these 3 things: Dharma, Artha and Kama. And nowadays, Dharma is also going out, because what's the need for mundane religion? So they basically want to separate the church from the state and just allow it to, be totally neglected and eventually, disappear from society. The atheistic would be pretty okay with that. So we can say that the main thing now has boiled down to economic development and sense gratification. But still you see that Sanda and Amarka, you could say that atheistic society was still a bit more advanced, because there was some sense of Dharma there. Some do some sense of refinement. We also know here that Hiranyakashipu, he was actually speaking quite high philosophy, sound philosophy actually, to his relatives, when Hiranyaksha was killed by the poor incarnation. So there was some knowledge there. There was some Atma Tattva, knowledge about the soul, the transmigration of the soul, and the law of karma, was presented by Hiranyakashipu. And therefore also it's mentioned, it's quite interesting when you read the 7th canto. It said, Sri Hiranyakashipu Uvacha. Normally we add to Sri Bhagavan Vacha, Sri Prahlad Vacha, but it's mentioned Sri Hiranyakashipu Vacha. So one sense of, okay, that's interesting, because he's the biggest demon in existence, and he used the word Sri. But what he was speaking was actually quite sound, transcendental knowledge. So that might be one understanding. And of course we know from the beginning, both Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu were Jai and Vijay, associates of the Lord, doorkeepers of Vaikuntha. So that can also explain why it was like that. It is said like that, Sri Hiranyakashipu Vacha. So, Prahlad Maharaj is being taught here by Sanda and Amarka, and he's being taught systematically and unceasingly. And that's also one aspect of the society we can see, that it's very organized. When we look at, for example, the Danish society, it is actually highly organized when you look at the academic, the educational world, we say. The organization of modern academic education, it is highly systematic. It has been made into a very specific science, although it is you can say a good aspect that it is systematic, but if it is systematic in teaching about subject matters which is not to the ultimate benefit of the living entity, then what's the real use? Srila Prabhupada, he would make his entrance into these modern academic institutions, and he would ask them, where's the department teaching about the soul? So it's very nice that you're all very organized, it's very refined, but where's the most important department of knowledge? There's no department for the teaching of the soul, and that was Prabhupada's critique, that you've organized yourself very nicely, but you forgot the most important part. So your organization will not have much value. There's not much value to it. But if in that very nice, polished Danish society, if Krishna can be added, it's very nice. That degree of systematic organization, that can be very nicely utilized in order to propagate Krishna consciousness. So this aspect of the modern society, Srila Prabhupada, he was actually praising or recognizing that India nowadays is like a lame man. Like a lame man, he can't walk, but he can see. And the Western side is like a blind man. A blind man, he can walk, but he can't see. So if the blind man carries the lame man together, by cooperation, then something can be achieved, something substantial can be achieved. So Prabhupada, he was actually eager that this degree of systemization, this nice degree of organization, that we utilized for the propagation of Krishna consciousness. So therefore we don't reject, you can say, this part of society. We just say that unless Krishna is included in that, is put on top of that, then it will not have much value, because after all, we'll still be contained within the cycle of birth and death if we simply follow these processes. Dharma, Artha and Karma, which is here being taught by Sanda and Amarka. So Prabhupada says that these four things, Dharma, Artha, Karma and Moksha, this is the Vedic process. And furthermore he mentions, when one is above the stages of Dharma, Artha, Karma and Moksha, one becomes a devotee. So then we can speak, what's the thing that separates a follower of the Vedic Vedavada, the Vedic way of life, and a devotee? What's the substantial difference? One might have some small discourse into that, since it is mentioned. Prabhupada, he writes it like that here. That is that ultimately, Dharma, Artha, Karma and Moksha, there's still, you can say, a lot of false ego involved in that, because you can do these things very much self-centered. It can be very for my benefit. Like, I'm doing this, I, a lot of focus on, myself. can be involved when one is engaged in these processes. So it is more or less a bit self-interested or selfishly motivated to quite some degree, and that is where the devotee is separated from the followers of Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha, is that from the starting point, bhakti, yoga, devotional service, it teaches that instead of focusing on your own sense satisfaction, the gratification of your own senses, that means the 5 gross bodily senses and the mind, the subtle sense. Instead of focusing on gratifying these with followers, you say Nadanam Nad Janam Na Sundaring, Danang Janam and Sundaring. These are the three things which satisfy most the gross physical senses and the subtle sense: name, fame, and adoration, and money and sex life. That is the interest in the Dharma, Artha, and Kama. So it's all self-interested. So a devotee says, instead of going there, instead of hankering, for the senses to come in touch with these objects, then you recognize that there is a supreme controller which is above all this, the sense objects and the senses. There is someone who is controlling all of this and is orchestrating this whole material world. He is the source of all spiritual and material worlds, which is actually the first way in the Chatusloki. The Chatusloki of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is presenting himself as Aham Sarvasya Prabhoho Mattang Sarvam Pravartate Iti Matva Bhajanti Mam Buddha Bhava Samanvita. I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me, and the wise who know this perfectly engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. So this big orchestration of sense objects and senses, gross senses and subtle sense, the mind, this is all being controlled and organized by the Supreme Controller. So Bhakti Yoga means that this Supreme Controller is there for all of us, and by satisfying his transcendental senses, then automatically the soul, who is a part and parcel of this Supreme Controller, is satisfied, is automatically satisfied. So this is the whole proposition in Bhakti Yoga. You try to satisfy the transcendental senses of the Supreme Lord, and then all your needs, all your hankering will be automatically satisfied. That's the whole philosophy of Bhakti Yoga in a nutshell. So when one is open to at least theoretically accept this and engages in the various processes of devotional service, which Prahlad Maharaj very nicely in this canto, he explains Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, like the 9 limbs of devotional service. He mentions as the process of various processes in devotional service. When one engages in these 9 processes, or even one of them, then one can have a direct experience of how, by doing service for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, then one's heart, one's inner hankerings can be satisfied. In one completely peaceful condition, one can be ultimately blissful. And especially stress is given to these first 2 elements, Shravanam, Kirtanam. Because after Krishna, he has presented himself in the Chatusloki as the Supreme Lord, then what's the next thing he does? He goes directly to the path of Bhakti Yoga. He goes directly to how the living entity can be satisfied, because he is coming for the benefit of the living entity. He is descending. Why does he have to come from Golok Vrindavan? He is enjoying that. All nice devotees are there, who are favorable, serving him favor. Why does he need to come to the material world? Where the living entities, they're envious, they're greedy, lusty, angry. Why does he need to come here? All fools and rascals. So he's simply coming for the benefit of all of us fools and rascals, you may say. He's descending and he's saying, Matchita matkata panam, bodayanta parasparam katayantas tamamitam tushyanti charanti char. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are dedicated to my devotional service, and they derive great bliss and satisfaction from conversing about me, constantly conversing about me and enlightening one another. So the pure devotees, they derive great bliss and satisfaction by constantly conversing about the Lord and enlightening one another. So Krishna goes directly to the need of the soul, and gives the way, the process by which the soul, the jiva, the conditioned soul, can be achieved this, which is actually the hankering. The hankering is for great bliss and satisfaction. That is what actually we're all hankering for. That's the inner desire which wants to be fulfilled. But we don't find it in the sense objects, the bhoga sangsparsha, the contact of the senses with the sense object. It is not there. The great bliss and satisfaction simply is not there. And that's why